Today we'll be going over how to use laser-guided bombs with the LANTIRN pod on the F-14 Tomcat. This tutorial will be pretty comprehensive and cover all the functions and controls, alongside tactical tips. I've broken it up into sections with timecodes listed if you wish to watch it in parts. The LANTIRN Low Altitude Navigation and Targeting Infrared for Night is an older generation targeting pod when compared to the Lightning II that most of us will be used to in DCS. It suffers from lower resolution and only a couple fixed zoom levels, making observation and target acquisition from distances greater than 10 miles very difficult. The operation of the LANTIRN is a two-person job in the Tomcat, with the RIO controlling the targeting pod and the pilot steering the aircraft onto target and assisting during the search. Most of the work is performed by the RIO, however it is important that the pilot understands the display too. If you wish to practice or try to do this alone without a human RIO, unfortunately at time of recording Jester AI is not capable of operating the LANTIRN pod. In this situation it's best to disable Jester AI altogether and then work both seats yourself, although this can be tricky. It's really recommended you have a human RIO for this. Setup. You'll first need to load the LANTIRN targeting pod onto your aircraft. This can only be loaded onto Station 8B. Once you do, a new control stick panel is mounted on the left side of the RIO's cockpit. You should also load up on some laser guided bombs, either GBU 10s, 12s, 16s or 24s. Before takeoff you will need to set your laser code for your bombs on the kneeboard. This is accessed by pressing right shift K. You then press these square brackets left and right to change the page. By pressing the corresponding key combination shown on the laser codes page, you can then change your laser code as you desire. It is best to not use the default 1688 in multiplayer to avoid conflicting lasers with other flights or your wingmen. For this, I'd recommend picking a number and then incrementing it up for each subsequent flight member. Remember, you can change the code of your laser that the pod emits, but you cannot change the code that your bombs will use after you take off. Once airborne, you will need to power up the targeting pod. This is done by turning the power selection to PCO. The pod will now warm up and align. This process takes about 5 minutes, so ensure you prepare before you reach the target area. Once the pod is ready, it will enter standby mode, indicated by a solid illuminated standby push button. When you're ready to use this pod, simply push this button and it will unstow the camera. This process takes about 30 seconds and will flash until ready, at which point it will show a solid operational light. Once this process is complete, you can push the TCS FLIR push button to switch the TV video source from the TCS camera to your LANTIRN pod and switch on your laser arm, both of which are found on the panel behind the LANTIRN control stick. Next, you need to enable the TV mode on your TID by cycling the rotary switch to TV, much like you would when selecting the TCS camera. Now we can see an image from the LANTIRN system. Display information. Before we progress further, we'll go over what information is presented on the screen. We shall start with the top left corner. This is our own information comprised of our coordinates, altitude, ground speed, and the dive angle, with positive for pitched up and negative for pitched down. Below that we've got the white hot or black hot indicator, showing us the polarity for contrast. As you might expect, anything shown in the selected colour is considered hot. Gain control is shown next. This will show either AGC or MGC. AGC, or automatic gain control, has the camera manage the gain for you automatically. MGC, manual gain control, indicates that it has been set by the operator manually. In the next segment, we have the targeting pod's information. We have SRA, the slant range to a point our target pod is looking at. This is activated with the laser and measures the direct distance of the camera pod to our target. Camera azimuth. This is the direction left or right that the camera is facing. Measured in degrees, you will see the letter L or R to indicate the direction the camera is facing. Below is the camera elevation, looking up or down. Negative for downwards, positive for looking upwards. Then we have the local time. To the right we have our master mode. This will be either air-to-air or air-to-ground. Below that we have the tracking type currently used by the pod. This will show rates for when the pod is not tracking and is following the aircraft's movements. This is not ground stabilized. Whenever you are slewing, the pod will revert to this mode and then return to the previous mode when you release the control. Moving right, we've got our laser code. This is the code our pod will emit when the laser is fired. Preceding that is a letter, either M or A. M indicates manual laser mode, requiring you to fire the laser yourself. A indicates automatic laser mode, which will fire the laser 10 seconds before weapons impact for you. Just above that we've got our selected weapon type. This is set by the selection drum on the armament panel. Beside that we've got the letter L, indicating that the laser is armed. This will flash when the laser is firing. The next collection of information is the location of our designated point, with time to go, showing the time until our aircraft will overfly the location, the bearing followed by range in nautical miles, the ground elevation in feet, and the coordinates of our designated point. Note that this is not necessarily where the pod is looking, but where our current designated point is. Above we've got the bomb release cues. When you approach the target, a line will fall from the top. You are then required to manually release your bomb as it reaches the 2 dashes. Beneath we have our time to release. This will count down until the moment we have to release our bomb. Once the bomb has been released, it will show the time to impact. Moving back towards the top, we see our steering cues. These are what the pilot will follow to direct the plane onto target. At the top we have our own heading. A caret indicating centered, and a reference line showing the direction we need to steer to overfly the target. Beneath that we have a number in degrees left or right that we need to steer in order to correct our path onto target. The pilot simply has to keep the vertical line on the bar centered beneath the caret. In the center we have a crosshair, showing where the laser will impact. On the outside we have a box, indicating the level of zoom, of which we have 3, wide, intermediate and narrow. It is worth noting that the Lantern does not have good optics and a limited resolution, so it becomes pixelated at high zoom levels. Around the display in general we have the airframe masking guide. This indicates the limits of the camera before it will be masked by the aircraft. The small square inside shows us where the camera is currently looking, with up being forwards, and the closer to the center or the edge of the display, the lower or higher the camera is looking, with the center being directly beneath your aircraft. If the square passes the mask line, the camera will cut to black and you will lose area or pinpoint tracks. If you're not planning on being a Rio or only interested in the pilot's position for now, you can jump to the next section, with a timecode on screen or from the description. Control inputs. With that, we'll now look into how to use and interact with the Lantern pod. The control stick does not move, however it features a number of control hats. Starting left, we have the controls for targeting. Pushing it forwards will enter point track mode. Pushing it aft will enter area track mode. Left and right will cycle through your waypoints, cueing the targeting pod to their location. Point track is indicated by a box drawn around the object. In this mode, the camera is directly tracking the contrast of an object, used often for moving vehicles or snapping onto high contrast objects. This also provides the most accurate tracking. Area track is locked to the approximate ground, so it can be prone to shifting around over time. If you're locking a tall object, it's best to aim the crosshair at the base, otherwise you can find yourself tracking a point far behind it. In the centre we have the slew hat. This steers the camera. You can bind this as either a key press or as an axis. Depressing the hat will toggle between black hot and white hot polarity. To the right we have the multifunction S4 hat. Unmodified, this hat slews the pod to a number of locations. Pushing forwards will point the camera towards the ADL when the lantern is in air-to-air mode, essentially boresighting it to the ADL or the plus icon on the HUD when the pilot is also in air-to-air mode. This is useful for locking aircraft. Pushing forwards when in air-to-ground mode, however, will cue the lantern to the centre of the HUD crosshair, allowing the pilot to visually place the lantern. This is good for when you have a target on your nose, for example if the pilot is performing a rocket or guns run, or they have just spotted a SAM site launch and have put their nose directly on it for you. Pushing the hat down will put the camera in snowplow mode, essentially pointing the camera down fixed position of the nose. This is good for searching for targets in the aircraft's flight path. Pushing the hat right will return your camera to your saved designated point, useful if you've lost sight thanks to masking or otherwise lost the target area. Left has no function unmodified. The hat can also be pressed down to declutter the display, progressively reducing information on view. Continuing to cycle this will bring back the full display. The slider is essentially a mode switcher. This goes from gain control or laser/focus. In the laser/focus position you can change your laser code. When selected, you'll see a number flashing in the laser code. You can now use the multifunction S4 hat on the right, mentioned before. Left or right will change the selected number, and up or down will increment the selected number up or down, allowing you to change your laser code as desired. Pushing the hat in will cycle between A automatic and M manual laser modes. In automatic mode, the laser system will automatically fire 10 seconds before impact of your weapons. Remember to ensure your laser code matches the one set on your kneeboard, and that your bombs cannot have their laser code changed in flight. Pushing the slider to the AGC/MGC position toggles the gain control modes from automatic to manual. With automatic selected, the camera will maintain what it believes is a clear picture. When selected, you will cycle to manual gain control in edit mode, indicated by a flashing MGC on the left side. Now you can adjust the gain levels by pushing the multifunction S4 hat up or down, and you can adjust the level by pushing it left or right. When you are done, pushing the slider again will stop NGC flashing and return you to normal function of the S4 hat, leaving your settings intact. Cycling the slider one more time will return you to automatic gain control. On the front of the stick, we have a two-stage trigger. The first stage will fire your laser. The second stage will designate a point under your crosshair, saving it with the details shown in the right-hand corner. You can then freely slew away from this point, and the mark will remain in place, allowing you to save a location to return to later should you wish, by pressing the multifunction S4 hat right. You can only store one designation at a time, however. Pressing the designate again will overwrite the previous one. This is used as the reference point for attacks and provides the steering and bomb release cues for the pilot. On the pinky switch there is a laser latch button. Pressing this will latch the laser on, making it fire without the need to hold down a button. To stop the laser firing, simply pull the first stage of the trigger, otherwise it will time out after about 1 minute. The lantern mode toggle will cycle between air-to-air and air-to-ground. Finally, we have the field of view switch. The red button on top which will cycle 3 levels of zoom for you on the lantern display. Attack preparation. Now that we've got a basic understanding of the controls and what information is presented to us, let's move forward with the fun part, finding targets and making them go boom. Before we start, however, we have to set up our system about 8 minutes before target. So warm up the pod. 5 minutes later you can then turn the pod to operation mode. During this wait you should set up the armament control panel, ensure you select the correct bomb type as listed on your kneeboard, and select the stations you wish to use, and ensure the fusing and settings are set as desired. Additionally, you should set the attack mode dial to manual. With the pod in operation mode and ready, arm your laser and change the TID mode to TV. You should now set your laser code. This needs to match what is set on your kneeboard on the ground, otherwise your bombs will not track. Whilst you're here, you can also set your laser to manual or automatic mode with the multifunction S4 press action. In automatic mode, the pod will begin lasing automatically 10 seconds before impact. As we intend on attacking ground targets, we should also switch the pod's mode to air to ground. Finding the target. Welcome back to any pilots who were snoozing in the corner. We now move on to the section that requires coordination. The pilot should enable the TV video feed on their VDI to allow you to see the lantern. This is done the same way as selecting the DCS camera. Provided the Rio has set the TV source to FLIR on the lantern panel, you will now see the lantern's image on your display. Now you'll need to locate your target. This can be achieved by a number of ways. If you are lucky, the mission has had provided a waypoint or coordinates, which can be set to a waypoint as a reference point to begin your search. Simply press the QWP plus or minus function from the left targeting hat, and then cycle your waypoints until you reach the target point. If you are without a waypoint, you'll need to make use of snowplow mode with the multifunction S4 down, or multifunction S4 up for HUD queued. Then, by coordinating with your pilot, you can get them pointing the nose on the target area, visually for you to acquire. In snowplow mode, the pilot simply points the nose over the target area and lets the Rio pick out the area. This is also a good mode to search for targets in your flight path. If you're using the HUD queued mode instead, the pilot can steer the lantern directly by placing the HUD crosshair on top of the target that they have visually acquired. This is particularly potent if you want to put the lantern quickly onto a SAM launch site or a source of tracer fire. You can also simply use the pod's rates mode and slew around until you find the target area, however this can get disorienting very quickly. Now that you are looking at the target area, lock it into area track mode to stop the camera from drifting. It is a good habit to also designate it to serve as a reference point. If you cannot get it to designate, ensure that you are in air to ground mode, and if the distance is too great, you may be unable to lock and will have to close into somewhere around 15 nautical miles first. Now, using a combination of zoom and slewing, search out for targets. Remember that vehicles will usually appear as hot targets. Based on the polarity you've chosen earlier, they will be either white or black. You may wish to switch between black hot or white hot, depending on the contrast and what's in the image. During this time, the pilot should be flying in a safe, clockwise orbit to keep the camera's field of view on the target area. Ideally at least 12,000 feet above ground level to keep you safe from anti-aircraft and infrared missile threats. It is a good idea for the pilot to keep their eyes out of the cockpit looking for signs of gunfire, missiles or other threats to help talk on the Rio if required, but also to keep your situational awareness up. The last thing you want is an unexpected missile ruining your fun. Attacking the target. Once you have the target, press the trigger full action to designate that point and switch to point track if you wish. With a target in your sights, you now need to run in on the target itself. At this point the pilot should reference the top of your lantern display, following the cues to get your nose on target and maintain it. There is no information on the HUD provided. By this point you should also be in air-to-ground mode with the master arm enabled. The RIO should have also set the attack mode to manual and prepared the armament panel. So now all you have to do is keep the marker centered on the lantern and follow it to target. During this time the RIO should be observing, keeping an eye outside the aircraft and checking to ensure the target remains within your crosshairs, although you may also wish to count down the release cue for the pilot. The time to release will be shown beneath the bomb queuing. When the bomb fall line reaches the dashed markers and the timer reaches 0, you should release your bomb. You will have to manually depress the weapon's release button when the countdown reaches 0, as there is no automatic release system. At this point the pilot simply has to maintain visual on the target with the pod by avoiding masking it with the airframe. If you need to maneuver, turning to the right will provide the least disturbance to the camera limits. If you do manage to mask the pod, the RIO can cue back to the designated point quickly, and provided you can restore vision in time, you can still rescue the attack. The RIO is free to sweeten the lock and ensure a good target point, but care should be taken to avoid slewing the laser rapidly, as it will cause the bomb to chase after it, potentially throwing it off and losing track. Below the bomb fall line you will see the TIMP, time to impact. This will count down to the approximate time of impact. At 10 seconds before impact, the automatic laser mode will enable the laser for you, or in manual mode the RIO should begin lasering the target, at which point your bomb should guide in onto the target and hit it. You may wish to switch to area track mode just before impact to avoid the camera slewing away in rates mode as it loses the point track. The process is the same if you wish to laser for another aircraft, however you will have to ensure they know where to find the target. This can be done with a laser spot tracker on certain aircraft equipped with them, or you can pass on the coordinates of your designated point to them. Of course, instead of running in on the target yourself, you can now maintain an orbit around it. It will then be up to your buddy to announce when they drop their bombs and give you cueing for when to turn the laser on. In addition, we can use the lantern in air-to-air mode. This is not a very useful feature however compared to the DCS. The easiest way to lock a target is with the camera cued to the ADL, and then the pilot aims the lantern onto a target for point lock. On the other hand, it is a fun toy for the RIO to play with if you're bored, by locking up friendly aircraft in the formation. As a final note, under controls in the cheats section for the RIO or pilot, you can enable the video export toggle. This will provide a full screen view of the lantern or DCS if you wish to use it. I hope you enjoyed, happy hunting and take care.